Hi there. Here's what I want to say. My name is Julie, first of all. I like to talk about spiritual stuff. I was having these thoughts about coping mechanisms versus navigating in real time. In my recent videos, I talked about practicing being present in my interactions with other people. And we just had a holiday called Thanksgiving, and I did get together with family. So I hadn't really been thinking about the fact that I was going to be practicing it, but I did practice it. I did it. I stayed present and navigated those interactions. First of all, I want to say I'm so glad that I was brought to a point where I could do that. I'm so glad that I was brought to a point that I was able to practice doing that. And I'm so glad that I practiced doing that before the day, you know? And what I saw happening was that in those moments amongst family members where certain parts of me are not welcome, and when I say that, I mean you know, I have a very spiritually minded focus for life. I also can see people's shadows. I understand the perpetuation of these patterns in us as humans, how we pass them along, how we adopt them, how they can be unhealthy, what detriments they cause us later when we adopt certain views, points, and stories and blah, blah, blahs, right? I have a lot of experience with shadow work, so it's pretty easy for me to see shadows behind certain, people's behaviors. And some are more obvious than others, right? And I think the ones that kind of alert me the most are the ones where it's like, oh, that's a direct damage that you're passing along to a child. Oh, and those are hard for me to watch. But also, I cannot intervene. I cannot say anything. So there's a part of me that's not welcome in those interactions, right? In certain family gatherings. You kind of got to do it to keep the peace, at least in my family. Not every one of your opinions needs to be shared. Not every one of your thoughts needs to be known. Not every improvement that you think you can make on the situation should be shared with others. And that's how we have matured into a place where we can actually gather and enjoy each other's company. Great. Except I'm well aware that there's part of me that's not welcome in that, and I'm sure that's the case for other people. But here's the difference. Being in presence means that in the moment when I'm recognizing there's a part of me or there's something within me that doesn't fit in this moment, that they wouldn't understand or they wouldn't even care about, like a perspective that I have, for instance, instead of making a story about that means I'm separate or I'm uncared about or I'm unwanted or I'm lonely, there was this opportunity to observe in myself that moment where I could have gone, oh, this is lonely because I can't be myself, but instead went, okay, I understand that you might want to feel lonely, Julie, but here you are amongst people that you'd have an opportunity to visit with. And it's also okay to feel sad that they don't get to see all of you. And I say that to myself internally, right? Not outside. They don't know that. But I'm present, so I'm seeing myself in real time and them and the interactions with them in real time. And as a result, I don't abandon myself or go into coping mechanism or tell myself a story about how I'm unacceptable or wrong or lesser. All of me was in that moment because I saw the parts of me that they couldn't. I saw the parts of me that they couldn't, you know? And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think it's well worth working my way to be in presence with my interactions with others. And there was actually one interaction in a separate gathering, actually, with one family member who engaged me in old patterns. But this time I recognized the pattern. So usually this person will engage me in the pattern. It's a dysfunctional relating pattern. I'm just swept up in it because it's the way I was raised and it's what was always done. And this time I was in presence, so I saw the pattern be engaged. Now, in this instance, I didn't like it. I sort of went home. It was between gatherings, so it wasn't like I didn't need to go home or anything. It was an appropriate time to go home. I think one was like on the eve of the holiday, this first interaction I'm talking about. So there was a time at home before the next day in the holiday of the gathering of the family. So on the eve, I went home and I was thinking about how this pattern had been engaged and how I didn't like it and I didn't want to be in it. And there was part of me that was just like feeling a little mad and angry, but I was just like letting those parts of me be. Not consciously thinking, oh, I'm going to let these parts of me be. I was just being angry. And not for too long. But then the next day I went and interacted with family members without that person. That person wasn't present at the gathering. And sort of the backlash of that pattern was playing out through other family members. Like, that's the whole pattern, that this person engages so that it runs through the whole family members, so that everybody is sort of jumping for them in a way. And I just didn't want to be part of it anymore. I don't want to be a pawn in their little strategy anymore, but other people were already engaged. So anyways, it played out, and I handled it a different way than I normally handle it. And then after the family gathering, I came home and I was thinking nothing of it, but then I let my mind go into the place where I started thinking, like, this is uncomfortable, I don't like this, And what it was, what I worked myself through was like a realization of like, this is uncomfortable because I've never done this before. This is a new boundary that I'm holding up for this person to not engage with me in that way. And because they're not willing to follow my boundary, I'm making sure they have to follow my boundary by doing this way, right? And so I was grappling with that a bit and feeling a little bit upset because it was uncomfortable for me to have to be sort of manipulative in a way that forces them to honor my boundary, right? Because I like being upfront. Oh, I should go grab my coffee before it gets too hot. One moment. I'm going to pause you. Terrible coffee. Worst coffee I've made in a while. Okay, so anyways. So the way that I got out of the little spiral that I had gotten into about thinking that I feel uncomfortable being in this, having to put up this boundary, the first time you put up a boundary, which I don't usually deal in boundaries, right? Usually I would prefer agreements. But since this person's not capable of making agreements with me, I have to put up a boundary. I have to know where my standard is for what I'm willing to accept in the relating dynamic. And this person was violating that. By their pure habit, this is something we weren't able to discuss, so I couldn't tell them that. They wouldn't understand, they wouldn't care, and they would probably just sabotage me in some other way. So I had to put this boundary up without them even realizing what I was doing. And then I realized that's what I was doing, when I was ruminating on it afterwards and a little upset that I was having to do it. I was realizing, what's right for me to do it. Actually, I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm protecting myself and my comfort level and my peace. And that matters. And it obviously doesn't matter to that person, but it matters to me. And that was me realizing that, I've broken through a pattern of sacrificing my own comfort level, my own standard of relating for other people in my family who choose to relate in an unfair way. And the fact that I was able to be in presence and act that way, even if I did question myself later, I think the questioning myself later part is what brought me to this realization that, like, if you have to deal with people who are like that, it's not just people who can be like that. It can be the government. It can be any institution. Authorities can be like that, where they don't really consider you. You just have to do what they want. And, it's appropriate to caretake yourself through the process of having to do that. Even something simple like waiting in a line at the grocery store. You have to caretake yourself through the process of doing that. Whether you think it's right that the person in front of you is taking so long or not. Whether you think it's right that the cashier is going so slow or not. You have to caretake yourself through the process. And maybe caretaking the self through the process of the interactions and relating is one of the things that was suppressed in people who grew up in homes where it was volatile, or people who grew up in homes where unfair relating was present. Just anywhere where you couldn't be as important as whatever was going on around you to the people in your vicinity, I guess. If as a child you had to forego your own needs to fit in, then this thing, just shifting this for self, is healing, is bringing yourself out of that pattern and kind of rescuing yourself from it. So without even realizing what I was doing, I I alleviated a shadow that was in me. And actually that family member who engaged me in a dynamic that I didn't want to be in was the one that made me realize that that's what I had been doing. In retrospect, it gave me a reason to kind of think about it and then reassure myself. And then reassuring myself was like, oh yeah, that's all I got to do. So that's what I was doing in the interactions with the family members at the family gathering. I was thinking, it's okay. I love you, even though you can't share this part of you and they have to miss out on it. And then for putting a boundary with a family member, it was like, it's okay that you put up this boundary. I appreciate you that you did it. Thank you for making sure that you have our back. Like saying that to myself, So not abandoning self in that way. In the way of letting self fall into old stories of, I'm a victim, I'm lonely, I'm not accepted. Or old stories of, this person is, abusing their authority with me and I have to just do what they want. Because there are ways that we can sort of just show up for ourselves, and you realize them when you are in presence. Because the thing is, like, I didn't know that there was a way to deal with that person who engaged me in the pattern I didn't want to be in. It's just that I was in presence enough that I responded in a way where it did cover me. And then it was afterwards that I reflected on it. And it was through being in presence that I was inspired to take the action. Like, I didn't have to formulate it in my mind and go, well, what can I do to make sure this doesn't affect me? No, being in presence in the moment when it was engaged through the other family members, because this was like a train reaction kind of thing, through the other family members when it was engaged, because this person set it off. And I know I'm not showing specifics, but it's because if any family members watch this video, I just don't want them to get lost in the stories of who did what, I would share that with them, maybe not on a video, but so that I could understand if they were understanding, and follow up and use more words if I needed to explain. But so basically, when those other family members engaged the pattern that had been begun by the other person, I was in presence. So in the present moment, my intuition came right through and had me respond in a way that was to my highest good automatically, because I was in presence. It was not because I needed to retreat and strategize or strategize right in the moment. It was my intuition in the moment of presence that came through to cover me. So, being in presence is a very powerful thing, I would say. Well worth it. So glad that I was guided to doing that through spirit, And yeah, that's where I'm at now. And it's kind of funny. I hadn't explored it deeper than that so far, but right before I stopped this video, we're only at 16 minutes. And it made me think about it in terms of like the other people that I dealt with before that, leading up to the holiday, and how that pattern was trying to show itself to me. And I think I was being presented with difficult moments, with different interactions. And now I realize it's because I was being given opportunity to caretake myself in the moment. Because sometimes a moment can take you out of presence, where you can be like worrying about the consequences of it or what's happening next, or you can get swept up in feeling like triggered by the pattern of, oh, this always happens, So if you're not practiced at being present for the interactions, then you can really get lost in it, and that's how those patterns perpetuate. And that's how we fail to notice that we're even in a pattern, a pattern of abandoning ourselves through interactions with others, where we may have had to do that earlier on. All right. What do you think? Any examples to share or thoughts or questions as a result of what I've shared? Feel free to share, but only what you feel comfortable sharing. I wonder, I'd like to have, engagement if it's appropriate, but I also want people to be discerning about what they would ever share in a comment section, All right. Bye.